All right. I have a few more questions, and then we will wrap up. Mr. Altman, what has been the most surprising use for ChatGPT you've seen? What are applications that you're seeing that are surprising?
People message ChatGPT billions of times per day, so they use it for all sorts of incredibly creative things. I will tell one personal story, which is, as mentioned earlier, I recently had a newborn. Clearly people did it, but I don't know how people figured out how to take care of newborns without ChatGPT. That has been a real lifesaver.
So I will tell you a story that I've told you before, but my teenage daughter several months ago sent me this long, detailed text, and it was emotional, and it was really well written, and I actually commented, I'm like, wow, this is really well written. She said, oh, I use ChatGPT to write it. I'm like, wait, you're texting your dad, and you don't, it is something about the new generation that it is so seamlessly integrated into life that she's sending an email, she's doing whatever, and she doesn't even hesitate to think about going to ChatGPT to capture her thoughts.
I have complicated feelings about that.
Well, use the app and then tell me what your feelings are. Google just revealed that their search traffic on Safari declined for the first time ever.
They didn't send me a Christmas card.
Will ChatGPT replace Google as the primary search engine, and if so, when?
Probably not. I think some use cases that people use search engines for today are definitely better done on a service like ChatGPT, but Google is like a ferocious competitor. They have a very strong AI team, a lot of infrastructure, a very well-protected business. And they're making great progress putting AI into their search.
All right, so a question that I have spent a lot of time talking to business leaders, CEOs in the tech space, AI. And one question that I've asked that I get different answers on, and I'm curious what the four of you say. How big a deal was DeepSeek? Is it a major, seismic, shocking development from China? Is it not that big a deal? Is it somewhere in between? And what's coming next? And let's each of the four of you.
Not a huge deal. There are two things about DeepSeek. One is that they made a good open source model, and the other is that they made a consumer app that, for the first time, briefly surpassed ChatGPT as the most downloaded AI tool, maybe the most downloaded app overall. There are going to be a lot of good open source models, and clearly there are incredibly talented people working at DeepSeek doing great research, so I'd expect more great models to come. Hopefully also us and some of our colleagues will put out great models too. On the consumer app, I think if the DeepSeek consumer app looked like it was going to beat ChatGPT and our American colleagues' apps as sort of the default AI systems that people use, that would be bad. But that does not currently look to us like what's happening.
I would say it's somewhere in between, Chairman Cruz. When you think about what we learned is there are different ways of doing things. So we have lots of incredibly innovative people in the United States. American models are clearly the best by far. However, when you have constraints that are placed, there are other ways of doing things, and I think we learned a few things in the process. I think the open source nature of DeepSeek was one of the things that probably was most impactful in just terms of how much can be done in an open source type of model and open ecosystem. But clearly, the United States is leading, and we need to continue, as we said, to accelerate innovation and adoption, as you started this hearing with.
I think DeepSeek did a lot of things. One of the things that it did was it sort of raised the specter of China's AI capability to a much broader audience than was perhaps focused on it prior to that, right? And so you saw that kind of reverberate through the financial markets. You saw like broad-based reaction, and suddenly everyone knows what DeepSeek is, and the fact that China is not theoretically in the race for AI dominance, but actually is very much a formidable competitor. And so you know, it was a starting gun in some ways for the broader population, and kind of maybe the broader consciousness of the fact that this is not a fait accompli, and that we're going to have to work as America together to kind of propel our solutions forward. And so I think that was one of the lasting impacts that we will see from that.
I would say, like Lisa, that somewhere in between, it wasn't shocking. I mean, it was one of a number of startups that we were following in China that we saw as having the potential to be innovative in this space. I do think there's a really interesting and important point that constraints encourage innovation in other ways. And I just think one of the interesting facts about DeepSeek is that of their, say, 200 or more employees, that was their size when they released these models, almost all of their employees, by design, were 4 years or less out of university. They wanted to hire people that would not bring to their work traditional ways of doing things.
So the kids are taking over the world?
They do every generation.
Related to that, were you finished with that, Mr. Smith? Related to that, we talked at the outset about the AI diffusion rule being rescinded, which I'm glad. I think it was a bad rule. I think it was overly complex. I think it put on a number of our trading partners unfair restrictions. And so I'm glad the president is rescinding it. That doesn't necessarily mean that there should be no restrictions, and there are a variety of views on what the rules should be concerning AI diffusion. NVIDIA has argued that we want American chips everywhere, even in China. Others have argued that we want to restrict at least the most advanced processors. I'm curious, each of the four of you, what do you think the rule should be, if anything, is to replace the AI diffusion rule? And Mr. Altman, we'll start with you.
I also was glad to see that rescinded. I agree there will need to be some constraints, but I think if the sort of mental model is winning diffusion instead of stopping diffusion, that directionally seems right. That doesn't mean there's no guardrails. It doesn't mean we say, like, we're going to go build a bigger data center in some other country than the US. Our intention is to build our biggest and best data centers in the US, do training in the US, build the models here, have our core research here. But then we do want to build inference centers with our partners around the world, and we've been working with the US government on that. I think that'll be good. To this point, that influence comes from people adopting US products and services up and down the stack, maybe most obviously if they're using ChatGPT versus DeepSeek, but also if they're using US chips and US data center technology and all of the amazing stuff Microsoft does. That's a win for us, and I think we should embrace that, but make sure that, you know, the most critical stuff, the creation of these models that will be so impactful, that should still happen here.
Dr. Su?
I think we would totally agree with the concept that some restrictions are necessary. This is a matter of national security as much as it is about AI diffusion. That being the case, we were happy to see the rescinding as well. And we view this as an opportunity to really simplify. Right at the end of the day, we've talked about the need to drive widespread adoption of our technology and our ecosystem. Simple rules that can be easily applied. That really allow our allies to protect our technology while still utilizing the best that the United States has to offer, I think is a good start in terms of where we're going. And again, this is an area where I think the devil's in the details, and it requires a lot of balance. And so from an industry standpoint, it's our job to put on the broader hat and work hand in hand with the administration and Congress to make our best recommendations so that it is a policy that has some stability as we go forward as well.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Trader.
So I'll echo what Sam and Lisa said, but national security is paramount, and then once you've addressed the limitations around national security, the opportunity to work with regulators to put together a regulatory framework beyond that makes a lot of sense. And the diffusion rule didn't allow us that opportunity to participate fully enough to feel like we were going to come away with what would be an optimal outcome at this point.
Mr. Smith?
I think we've all discussed the right recipe. Simplify, eliminate these tier 2 quantitative restrictions that undermine confidence in access to American technology, but enable even the most advanced GPUs the country has to be exported to data centers that are run by a trusted provider, that meet certain security standards. That means both physical and cybersecurity standards, that there is protection against diversion of the chips, and there are precautions against certain uses. And that means two things. One is that there are controls in place to ensure that, say, the PLA, the Chinese military, isn't accessing and using these advanced models or advanced chips in a data center, regardless of the country that it's in. And there are certain harmful uses that one should want to prohibit and preclude, like using a model to create the next pandemic, a biological weapon, a nuclear weapon. And I think that there is an approach that is coming together that can be retained and can move forward and that strikes the right balance.
Okay, final question for each of you. Would you support a 10-year learning period on states issuing comprehensive AI regulation or some form of federal preemption to create an even playing field for AI developers and deployers?
I'm not sure what a 10-year learning period means, but I think having one federal approach focused on light touch and an even playing field sounds great to me.
Aligned federal approach with really thoughtful regulation would be very, very much appreciated.
I agree with both of my colleagues.
Yeah, I think that builds obviously on the op-ed that you and Senator Graham published last year. And I think giving the country time, your analogy, your example was this work for the internet. There's a lot of details that need to be hammered out. But giving the federal government the ability to lead, especially in the areas around product safety and pre-release reviews and the like, would help this industry grow.
Well, I want